Last week on Battle of the Ports, we took a look at Top Gear 2, a game that started life on the Super Famicom but actually has its roots from the Lotus games that started life on the Amiga. This week we take a look at the first game in the Lotus series, Lotus Esprit Turbo Challenge. Published in 1990 by Gremlin Graphics and developed by Sean Southern and Andrew Morris of Magnetic Fields, Lotus Esprit Challenge shows that the Amiga could produce a good racing game unlike all the extremely poor arcade ports it received. This Amiga version features 32 tracks of varying scenery. The tracks are quite diverse for the time, featuring a variety of turns and hills. While racing, the player must manage their fuel supply by occasionally visiting the pit stop for refueling. Also, apart from overtaking other cars, the racer must also avoid various hazards and obstacles, such as roadblocks, slippery puddles and wooden logs. Gameplay is a little stiff compared to later games in the series. The cars feel really heavy and the sensational speed isn't quite there. Still, the 3D effect is very smooth and really does put a lot of other Amiga racing games to shame. A great game for the time, but maybe these days more of a rose-tinted glasses of a game. Still fun, but not as good as I remembered it being. Lotus also made its way onto the Amiga CD32 as part of the classic Lotus collection, a CD compilation set that includes the 3 Amiga Lotus games. This version has received a new CD soundtrack, but has lost the sound effects when playing with music. How on earth was that allowed? If the CD32 is streaming music from the CD, then there's no excuse not to include sound effects. Playing this game via any CD32 emulator will glitch out from the second course, as you can see. This is an emulation issue though. It can be fixed by messing around with the config files, but I've got no time for that. The Atari ST port is very similar to the Amiga version. It plays just the same, but it does look a little different in the HUD department and maybe some slight details. The music on the other hand is pretty awful. There are no sound effects when the music is used during races. Okay, on to the 8-bit port, starting with the Amstrad CPC. Now, I will say for an Amstrad CPC racer, this looks pretty nice, but I have a feeling it's a port of the ZX Spectrum game. We'll find out about that later on. The play window is tiny, which causes a few problems. The most noticeable is the camera positioning as you come to the brow of a hill. It's so low to the ground that you can't see anything. All you can see is the back of your car. This is problematic because there could be another car in front of you, yet you'd never know. There could be a turn at the top of the hill, but you wouldn't know that either. Lotus on the CPC is a pretty good effort, but a flawed one. And yes, we were right, the Amstrad CPC port was indeed based upon the ZX Spectrum version. This game is identical, besides the typical specky color clashing and slightly faster speed. Traditionally, racing games on the Commodore 64 have been pretty bad, and this is no exception. Like many a C64 racing game, the cars just slide from left to right with no actual feeling of driving involved. The cars are also too big for the track, making it a real pain to get past anyone. Then there's the issue with perspective. Barriers and the like are massive. They're taller than your car. Sadly, the C64 version of Lotus is probably the worst of the bunch. And let's take a look at all those versions of Lotus Esprit Turbo Challenge running side by side.